There's a specific type of guilt that arrives not when things are going badly, but when you dare to stop. You sit down, the shift is done, there's nowhere you need to be for the next few hours, and instead of feeling relief, you feel this creeping unease, a voice that sounds almost reasonable, that tells you there's something that you should be doing, that the time you're spending sitting here is time someone else is using to get ahead, that rest is fine in theory, but in practice it's a luxury that you haven't quite earned yet. That voice, that specific, relentless, quietly devastating voice, that's what this video is about. Not the dramatic version of losing yourself in a business, the ordinary version, the one that makes taking an evening off feel like a moral failure, the one that turns a Sunday afternoon into an exercise in guilt management rather than actual rest. And more importantly, what you can do about it, because that voice is not telling you the truth and you don't have to keep listening to it. Welcome to the Lead Well channel, where we explore the inner world of leadership, well-being, and what it means to build a business and a life that doesn't break you. My name's Trevor and I've run a multi-award winning restaurant and cocktail bar, but I didn't come from a hospitality background. I built the business from the ground on up, learning as I went, figuring it out in real time. And for a significant period of that time, I had almost no life outside of it. Not because the business demanded every hour literally, although some weeks it did, but because the guilt of stepping away was so persistent and so convincing that I'd stopped trying to argue with it. This video is about permission, not the intellectual understanding that you need a life outside the business. Most founders I work with have that understanding already. They could tell you exactly why balance matters and why rest is important and why sustainable leadership requires something outside of work to draw from. They know all of that. The gap isn't knowledge, it's permission. The actual lived, felt in the body permission to close the laptop and be somewhere else without the guilt following you there. That gap is what I want to talk about today. Let me describe where I think this comes from, because I don't think it's random and I don't think it's a personal failing. I think it's been cultivated. We live in an environment that celebrates a particular kind of founder. The one who never stops, the one who outworks everyone. The David Goggins school of thought that says every minute you're not pushing is a minute that someone else is using to get ahead of you. Rest is weakness dressed up as self-care, that the founders who win are the ones who are willing to sacrifice everything, and the ones who aren't willing to do that simply don't want it enough. That message is everywhere, and when you're a founder who cares deeply about what you built, has put years and money and identity into it, it tells you that taking time for yourself is the same as being the person who sleeps while the competition works. It tells you that sitting down in front of the television when there are things that you could be doing for the business is a form of disloyalty to the thing that you're supposed to be building. And so the guilt arrives every time you try to step away, every time you do something that has nothing to do with the business, every time you give yourself permission to just exist as a person rather than as a founder. There's also a specific version of this that I think is particularly acute for people running hospitality businesses. When you're the last line of defense for everything, when every problem runs through you and the staff depend on you and the business depends on you and there are real people whose livelihoods are connected to how well you perform, stepping away feels almost disloyal, like you're abandoning a post, like you're taking a nap while your team is still on the floor. That guilt isn't weakness, it's actually evidence of how much you care. The problem is that caring and never stopping are not the same thing, even though the guilt tries very hard to convince you that they are. What guilt does to joy. Here's what I didn't understand for a long time. The guilt doesn't just make stepping away uncomfortable. Over time, it kills the capacity for joy itself. Not dramatically, not all at once, slowly and quietly in a way that's almost impossible to notice while it's happening. Burnout and sustained guilt remove your ability to make decisions that lead to your own enjoyment. They remove perspective that lets you see what you actually like doing. You forget how to be joyful. You forget how to be present. You sit in a room full of people who love you and you're somewhere else entirely, running through the list of things that the business needs while performing the version of yourself that's supposed to be having a good time. I went through a long period where I was physically present in my life, but mentally absent from almost all of it. I call it the grey zone, and I've talked about it before. The complacency and the numbness and the apathy that settle in when the pressure has been sustained for long enough without any genuine release. What I didn't know at the time, and what I hated myself for when I eventually did know it, was that I'd lost the ability to choose enjoyment. Not because I didn't want it, because the guilt and the overwhelm had made it inaccessible. I couldn't decide to go to the driving range and actually enjoy it. I couldn't sit with friends and actually be there. The mechanism for receiving good things had been so thoroughly trained out of me that even when the opportunity was right in front of me, I couldn't even pick it up. That's the real cost of the guilt. Not just discomfort when you try and step away, the gradual erosion of the version of yourself that knows how to be somewhere other than inside that pressure. The day I found the paintbrush. There wasn't a dramatic moment when this changed. There was a quiet one. I started printing and painting models, things that had nothing to do with the business, nothing to do with hospitality, nothing to do with any of the things that had been consuming my headspace for years. Just small figures or large figures, a paintbrush, and the specific technical challenge of getting a skin effect right or blending the color correctly. And somewhere in the focus that required, in the narrowing of the whole world down to that paintbrush and that figure and nothing else, something happened that I hadn't felt for a long time. I stopped thinking about work. Not because I decided to, because the absorption was complete enough that there was no room for anything else. The nervous system, for the first time in longer than I could track, had somewhere genuinely different to be. What that gave me wasn't just a hobby, it gave me proof. Evidence that the guilt wasn't telling the truth about what would happen if I stepped away. The business didn't collapse because I spent 3 hours painting a model. Nothing got worse. The problems that had been waiting for me were still there when I came back, but I was slightly more capable of meeting them because something had been replenished that had been empty for a long time. That proof matters because the guilt is fundamentally a prediction. It tells you that stepping away will cost you something, that enjoyment is a risk that you can't afford, and the only way to disprove that prediction is to test it, to step away and see what actually happens. And what actually happens almost every time is less catastrophic than the guilt said it would be. The 3D printing was the beginning of permission. Not the permission I'd intellectually understood I needed, the felt, embodied, nervous system level permission that comes from experience rather than argument. Before I go any further, I want to mention the Lead World community. It's a free space for hospitality founders where we have exactly these conversations. If you're finding any of this resonant and you want to be around people who understand what this actually feels like from the inside, the link's in the description. Come find us, it's completely free. Let's get back to the video. Frank and the negative voice. I want to tell you about Frank. Frank is the name I gave to the part of my brain that shows up when I'm trying to do something good for myself and it tells me that I shouldn't. He's the voice that says, this isn't the time for this, that I should be working, that enjoying myself while the business has problems is self-indulgent at best and irresponsible at worst. He sounds very reasonable. He often makes a fair point or two, and for years I let him run the show without ever really questioning whether his assessment of the situation was accurate. At some point, I started doing something that sounds slightly ridiculous, but has been one of the most useful things that I've done. When Frank shows up, I tell him out loud that his thoughts aren't conducive to my day and that I'm going to put it to one side. I acknowledge that he's there. I don't fight him. I just decline to follow him. Naming the voice separates it from you. It stops it being the whole of your experience and makes it the thing happening inside your experience that you can choose to engage with or not. Frank has an opinion. And that opinion is sometimes useful information and sometimes just old conditioning that doesn't serve in the moment. Learning to tell the difference is practice rather than a destination, but naming him was the beginning of being able to do it. Around the same time, I started building the practical structures that made the non-negotiables real rather than the aspirational, because knowing you need them and actually having them are very different things. Writing them down, putting them in the diary and treating them as commitments with the same weight as any other commitment. The morning routine as the anchor that everything else organizes around. The gym and the eating and the dog walks as things that happen because they're in the structure, not because motivation showed up on the right day to support them. And here's the thing I had to learn about discipline that changed how I thought about all of this. Motivation is unreliable. It shows up when conditions are good and disappears when conditions are hard. And conditions in hospitality are rarely consistently good. Discipline shows up regardless of conditions. You build it not through willpower, but through repetition, through doing the thing enough times in a row that it becomes the path of least resistance rather than an effort for choice. The positive habits gradually replace the destructive ones, not through a grand decision or a dramatic turning point, through slow substitution. The breath work and the exercise and the time with Shiv and the eating well, these things made the internal voice quieter. They made Frank less persistent, not because they fixed anything in a single stroke, but because they gave the nervous system something better to run on. And a nervous system running on something better is more capable of choosing better things. It compounds slowly in the right direction. On the phone check-in. The every 20 minutes pullback towards the business during times it's supposed to be yours, I'm not going to tell you that I solved this completely. I haven't. The business still wins sometimes. Sometimes a thought or an inspiration arrives during protective time, and there's nothing wrong with acting on it. Part of why you got into this in the first place is because you like creating things, following ideas, making things happen. That impulse isn't a problem to be eliminated. The difference is intention. Acting on a genuine creative impulse is different from anxiously checking whether something has gone wrong. One is you being the founder you actually are. The other is the guilt and the anxiety using the business as a reason to stay in the discomfort that feels more familiar than rest. Learning to tell those apart is the work, and it doesn't happen quickly. Repetition is what shifts it, not perfection. Just more days where you get it right than days when you don't. Why you got into this in the first place. Most people who start a hospitality business or any business will tell you some version of the same thing when you ask them why they did it. And it's usually freedom. The ability to build something theirs, to work for themselves, to have control over their time and the decisions and the direction of their life in a way that employment wasn't giving them. To create something that reflected who they were and what they believed was possible. The great irony is that most founders end up with less freedom than they had before they started. The business, which was supposed to give them everything, becomes the thing that takes everything. And the freedom that was the whole point of the exercise becomes theoretical, something that you might get to eventually, when the business is more stable, when the team is stronger, when things are less pressurized, when you've earned it. That moment never comes on its own. You have to decide it's arrived. Remembering why you got into this is one of the most useful things that I found for breaking the guilt cycle. Not as a motivational exercise, as a reality check. You didn't build this to become a prisoner of it. You didn't sacrifice the security of employment to end up in a version of servitude that's worse because you can't even blame an employer for it. You built it because you believed you could create something worthwhile. And the person who builds worthwhile things is not the one who gives everything to the building and nothing to the builder. That person runs out. That person becomes a hollowed out version of what the business needs. That person is less capable of making the business work, not more, because they've got nothing left to bring to it. The life outside the business is not a competition with the business. It's what the business draws from, the version of you that exists when you close that laptop and go for a walk or sit down with a friend or lose yourself in something creative for an hour. That version is what shows up the next morning with the perspective and the energy and the capacity that the business actually needs. Find the things that give you joy, even if you've forgotten what they are, especially if you've forgotten what they are. Listen to a song with your eyes closed. Go for a run, swing in a golf club, throw in a ball for a dog, playing a board game, driving, anything. Something that reminds you there is a person here who exists outside of what they built. Bring those things back in small doses and then find more of them. Then protect them, not because you've earned the right to have them, because you need them, because they're load bearing, because they're the account that everything else draws from, and the account needs to have something in it. What balance actually means. I want to end with an honest version of this because I think the word balance gets used in a way that sets people up for failure. Balance doesn't mean equal time. It doesn't mean the business gets 40 hours a week and your personal life gets 40 hours a week and everything is neatly symmetrical. That's not what a hospitality business looks like, and pretending it is just creates another thing to feel guilty about when the reality doesn't match. Balance, the version that's actually achievable, means flexibility in both directions. It means the business gets more of you during the hard weeks and you get more of yourself during the quieter ones. It means as many good days as bad ones, not every day being a good one. It means as many positive habits available to you when the difficult ones come knocking, as you have destructive habits that are just trying to pull you back. It means not cancelling on yourself or the people that you love more than once in a row without making it right. And it means accepting, with as much self-compassion as you can manage, that guilt probably never goes away. I won't tell you it does because that would be dishonest, and I think you'd know it was. What changes is your relationship with it. It becomes something that you can name and acknowledge and choose not to obey, rather than something that runs you without your awareness. Frank is still there. He just has less authority than he used to. The goal isn't to arrive somewhere permanent and resolved. It's to keep walking in the right direction, imperfectly, with more good days than bad ones, without punishing yourself too harshly when the old patterns come back, because they will come back sometimes. That's not failure, that's just human, and being human is something that you're allowed to be, even when you're also running a business. We started with that voice, the one that arrives when you dare to stop, the one that says that you haven't earned this yet, that rest is disloyalty and enjoyment is a luxury and the founders who win are the ones who never sit down. That voice is not telling you the truth. It's telling you a story that the culture around entrepreneurship has been writing for years and that hospitality industry has been reinforcing since the day that you open the doors. You're allowed to have a life outside the business, not because you've worked hard enough to deserve it, because you need it, because the business needs you to have it. Because the person who comes back from that dog walk or the driving range or the 3 hours lost in a paintbrush is more capable of leading than the person that never stopped. Find your version of 3D printing. Name your Frank. Build your structures that make the non-negotiables real rather than aspirational. And start with one thing this week. The Lead Well community is free. It's in the description. Come and find us. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a like and a subscribe. It helps me, it helps the channel, and it helps people like us find the content that really matters. And as always, I'd love to remind you that you matter too. Don't forget that.